Well, let me just get started so we
Okay,
don't
I've
get.
given you the ability to share screen if you want that.
Okay. Well, given that I can't see the screen, I doubt if I can share. So let's get started. I came out of high school in 1969. I graduated from Loyola High School up the road. And in those days, if you didn't have any idea what you were going to do other than you wanted to go to college, you went to Loyola College right down to, about 2 miles down the road on Charles Street. So I started in 1969, graduated in 73, as I said. And when I arrived there, it was almost mandatory that you declare a major. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. And I really focused on psychology originally. I thought I might make an interesting psychologist. But one of the first courses I took in my freshman year was an introduction to sociology. And that pretty much sold me on what I wanted to do. And the major reason was it gave me a much broader perspective on the individual and the kinds of issues that occur on the individual level, psychological level, and how they play out not only for that individual, but the people around them, whether it be a family or a community. So I graduated in 1973 with a BA in sociology. Not sure what I was going to do with that BA in sociology. I couldn't find any ads in the Baltimore Sun papers. And a friend of mine who graduated both places with me was going down to the University of Maryland to look at the School of Social Work for a possibility master's in social work. And I asked if I could go along, which I did. And this seemed to be kind of an ideal fit or application of everything that I learned in my sociology classes, as well as 1 or 2 psychology classes. So I finished the master's degree in 2 years because it's a 60 credit degree. And I was off and running. Obviously, I needed a job. And someone recommended me to Baltimore City Hospitals. And I got an interview in the drug treatment program. It was a methadone maintenance program. And when I was walking down the hallway to my first day, there was a gentleman coming towards me who I recognized, and he was actually one of my childhood friends. And he said something to the effect of, "Oh, Jim, it's really good to see you. I guess you're here to get on methadone and the program." I said, "No, Jack, I'm not here to get on methadone." He says, "Well, what are you doing here?" And I says, "I'm going to be a counselor." And he wanted to know if I could be his counselor. I said, "No, that doesn't sound like a good idea." And then spent 8 years really developing a wide range of programs for individuals as well as families. At that time, families basically would just ignore their children if they were involved in any kind of narcotics and that kind of other psychotropic drugs. And it was really difficult to try to treat an individual if you couldn't treat the family simultaneously. So we developed some really creative programs along those lines. And I stayed there for about 10 years. And then a job became available over at Johns Hopkins in the hospital, working in the cancer center. And obviously, 2 of my relatives had died of cancer. And I felt that that was a very difficult situation, something very compelling that I wanted to learn more about. So I was able to get the job and eventually rise to the director of the program, and then developing a whole range of programs to really deal with primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention. And we can talk about those individually if anybody is interested in those. And really developed a program that was recognized nationally. And if I could see my slides, I can just kind of illustrate this for you real quickly, and then I'll stop. Can you show my slides?
You have the ability to do share screen. Do you know how to make that work?
No, I don't. Not since I can't see my screen.
Oh.
I'm still seeing all kinds of advertisements. I don't know. I don't know whether I want to X out it, take a chance and X out. Oh, I'm back. Sensational. Oh, share screen. Okay. And where are the slides? Are they here? No? Oh, there they are. Can somebody bring those? Let me show. Okay, do this. Okay, there we go.
Yep.
All right, let me go
Oh,
back to the
perfect.
top. And I'll do these fairly quickly just to give you an idea as to how we really approach things. So what I entitled this, because what we wanted to do was really not only build a very effective psychosocial program where we're dealing with psychological and social issues associated with addictions, but we really wanted to build it within a research framework so we could really understand how to do what we needed to do and improve situations. So what we wanted to do is try to reduce cancer disparities. At this time, cancer was the leading cause of death in the state of Maryland, as well as a high level of mortality in Baltimore City. And there were very few effective programs really developed at focusing on what are all the needs of cancer patients and their family members beyond the treatment of the disease. So we also recognized early on that there were significant cancer disparities that existed, and that the populations that lived adjacent to Johns Hopkins Hospital, and I'll show you some geocoded maps to help us understand this, had extremely high rates of cancer mortality. So if you think about this, you're living in Baltimore City, you have probably the #1 cancer center at that time, sitting adjacent to a neighborhood where that neighborhood had one of the highest cancer mortality rates in the country. So you began to look at that and you saw what the people that actually had access to Johns Hopkins were from regions outside of Baltimore City and throughout the state, as well as across the United States. So it was a very unusual population to serve, but that population adjacent to Johns Hopkins really did experience significant mortality. And this is a geocoded map, one of the last maps that we put out in 2014. But the darker brown areas have the highest cancer mortality in Baltimore City. And if you look in the middle of that map, you'll see a little white square. That's Johns Hopkins Hospital. So you can see if you look at that, and you have probably at that time the #1 cancer center in the United States, and then directly across the street from it, you have a neighborhood that had one of the highest cancer mortality rates in the state of Maryland. And this is another way of looking at it by census tract. And you can see all the various neighborhoods throughout the city of Baltimore. And unfortunately, the red areas are areas that have the lowest life expectancy. So if you look at that white square again, you'll see Johns Hopkins Hospital, and then directly adjacent, not only an area that has one of the highest cancer mortality rates, but it also had one of the lowest life expectancy rates. So we saw this as a major problem. And we developed this map to try to really show the distinction even better, saying that where you live and where you grow up will determine how long you live. And if you look at this map of Baltimore, those two neighborhoods are exactly 5 miles apart. So if you look at Roland Park, you'll see a median household income of $90,000, a very low unemployment rate, one of the highest life expectancy rates in Baltimore City, and a very low homicide rate. So if you drop down merely 5 miles to Madison East End, you'll see a neighborhood that has a third of that income, a very high unemployment rate. Life expectancy drops by 20 years, and then a very high homicide rate, obviously due to a lot of crime that goes on in East Baltimore. When we tried to begin to think about this long term, and we developed this little grid to show exactly what we had hoped to do, if you can find across the x-axis the year 1990, and then look upward till you get to the green line, what that is, that's African American mortality for all cancer sites. So of the populations that we graphed here, put out in this graph, African Americans had the highest cancer mortality rate in Baltimore City. And then the orange, I'm sorry, yeah, the green would be African Americans. Then the red line would be the white population. Now you can see in 1990, there's a significant difference that is illustrated by this, which really does match up with the other data. But if you look at what has happened over the last 30 years, that those lines have come down dramatically and are really ready to begin to intersect. So everything that's been done in Baltimore City to deal with these problems, we've been able to develop the data to show that the difference has decreased significantly. And there's a point in time, probably in the next 2 years or so, where those lines will actually meet, that there will no longer be a difference in cancer mortality for the white population versus the Black population. And then this one I'll leave you with, and it always interested me to look at life expectancy throughout the globe. And if you look above the green line, what you'll see is that about 20 industrialized countries around the world, and Japan, as you can see, has the highest life expectancy in the world. But if you follow that green bar across the middle to where the United States appears on that, you'll see that the United States, of all those industrialized countries, has the lowest life expectancy in the world. So that map was mapped out over through 2014. So it tells us still that on a large kind of a national level, we still have a good bit of work to do. And then this is how we organized our program so that we could look at all of these issues. We established a center called the Center to Reduce Cancer Disparities. What our vision was that everyone should have equal access to quality cancer service, prevention, early detection, treatment, survivorship. And then how we organize some programs across that continuum. So under primary prevention, we developed a household smoking cessation project for East Baltimore, HPV screening for the human papillomas virus. Secondary prevention, we had a number of screening programs. And then under tertiary prevention, really focusing on new approaches to dealing with the diagnosis of cancer and how we could assist people as well as their family members through their cancer treatments. Let me stop there.
Okay, you can unshare.
Okay. I don't see that tab.
No, you don't want to close that. Cancel
I
that.
don't.
It should be in the center of the screen, I think, or down at the bottom. Just stop share.
I got joined from your browser. Oh, stop share. Wait a minute. There we go.
Good. Okay, we got you back. Okay, what I was going to suggest is maybe we hear from Emily and then ask questions of both of you. Other questions for Emily or for Jim? And if you are on Zoom, feel free to add your questions to chat and we will ask them. Yes, go ahead.
Can you wait?
They can hear you.
Sorry. Jim, did you go to Hopkins and get your degree at their School of Public Health?
Yes, I did. And again, that was influenced by a lot of things. Number one, I was obviously very familiar with the school. I had been over there to give lectures about cancer and so on before I picked up my PhD. And it just seemed the right thing to do. I've had a tuition benefit, so that enticed me to be there. But the more I spent in the School of Public Health, the amount of impressive people I met that really could help me develop a whole range of ideas and activities around cancer, because obviously it's not a single diagnosis. And and it gave me really the structure on how to approach a committee, a community like East Baltimore. Along the way, though, we built community-based sites so that we could hire individuals from the neighborhoods and train them to be community educators to speak on our behalf and so on. So it was a long process, and obviously we were doing that work for, just about a little bit more than 20 years. And again, if you think back to that mortality grid, then the last slide, you can see the real change in mortality in the state of Maryland. So.
I had a follow-up.
Okay, go for it.
I'm going to Hopkins for their public health in for my master's. Do you have any advice? Don't do that. Do you have any
I will
advice?
be happy to give you plenty of advice. You have on who to take and who not to take in their courses.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
The worst course, by the way, was 9 credits in biostatistics. I'm not a mathematical guy. I mean, I understand stats and basically how to present them and all. I just don't want to do them. I'd like somebody else to do it for me. So,
Go ahead.
My question was for Jim. Jim, how did environmental racism factor in cancer disparities in East Baltimore?
how did what?
Environmental racism factor in the cancer disparities?
I think the racism that existed for years in East Baltimore, and I'm not saying that the problems have been resolved, is simply that no one paid attention to it. I mean, the community knew it. We had so much activity within the churches, working with the ministers and so on. They understood the problem and so on. But building access and everything you need to do so that someone can walk in and be seen and be treated as quickly as possible. The case that really started all of this for me was Teresa James, who was one of my best and most effective social workers, called me on the phone and said, we have a case in the emergency room that was catastrophic. And we arrived in the emergency room together. And it was a 46-year-old woman, African-American, lived 6 blocks from the cancer center, lived alone, basically estranged from her family. And she was brought in by AMBO to the emergency room with a widely metastatic stage 4 breast tumor. And she had suffered for probably quite some time alone with that disease. And Teresa and I just made a pact, this should never happen again. And I'm not saying we prevented every early death, but the amount of screening programs that we did for lung cancer, cervical cancer, prostate cancer, and so on, because these cancer affects African-American men and women, to a significant degree.
But I meant environmental factors, environmental racism.
Oh, environmental factors. Well, one day we were, not too far from Somerset Homes, and we went to make a visit. And we went in, and it was Teresa again and I, and we felt it was difficult to breathe in that apartment. All the windows were closed. It was pretty locked tight. The person was a smoker. smoking about 2.5 packs a day in that apartment. And obviously tobacco smoke can be recycled and inhaled and cause significant problems. But there are just a number of environmental exposures. There are things in the soil and other things. And there was a good bit of industry not too far from the hospital, probably about 8 blocks down towards southeast. And a lot of chemical exposures and so on. So people, you live in an urban area and you can be exposed to a great deal. Some census tracts get far more exposures than others. But tobacco was a major driver for development of cancer with the amount of smoking that went on in the community.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So Jim, was it difficult maybe in the early points with like developing a relationship with different members within the African American community in Baltimore, like due to the case of Henrietta Lacks, just like that place?
Oh, sure. No, absolutely. No trust whatsoever. And the only way we felt we could proceed is that we were equal partners in everything that we did and everything that we developed. And we did not bring a program in to the community without their full participation in the development and the endorsement, plus also key community leaders. Pastor Marshall Prentice, his church is still very active up on Preston Street, and Reverend Melvin Tuggle, who unfortunately died of prostate cancer. They were like major forces, and if they said it's okay to work with Jim, that was the endorsement we needed. But that really took time. That took several years to develop for people to trust us.
Further questions?
Oh,
Go ahead.
I guess this question is a bit more early in your career with the methadone clinics. Could you talk more about, I guess, what that experience was like? Just because, like, I'm from Baltimore, I know people have been part of methadone clinics in the sense of like it does sort of help them, but then also sort of can be a gateway drug for like other addictions.
Right. Well, it's a difficult issue, we learned very early on by looking at other programs, and the earliest program in Baltimore City was Man Alive, and I think Man Alive still may be operating over kind of in towards Northwest Baltimore, but the unfortunate belief at that time was high dose methadone, and dosages tended to go from 60 to 80 milligrams in an effort to decrease a desire to pursue narcotics such as heroin. And there's a reasonable thought to that, but the problem is that 80 milligrams of methadone is highly addictive, and people can really begin to learn how to be productive again. But then at some point that there needs to be some level of detoxification. And when the dose is that high, it becomes even more difficult. So we had the philosophy in our program of a low dose methadone program, only increasing the dose to prevent the onset of withdrawal and not going beyond that. So we had a lot of patients on 30 milligrams or 40 milligrams. And but we tried to keep everybody at 50 or below. That was our philosophy. And we were treating about 200 people a day. So it's not like it was a small clinic. And but we put in, we hired licensed social workers and counselors, and we really wanted to provide some services. We also had a very effective health program because often when a new patient came in, they had a number of other health problems. that need to be addressed that they were not addressing. So it really needs to be a comprehensive approach. And then we eventually even put in a family interviewing room, because what we found was people always thought, well, the addict is estranged from their family. They're banished. They don't see them. What we found out when we really started talking to people and monitoring them, an addict would go and visit their family every day. It was a enmeshed relationship, which only led to more and more and more conflict, which led to more and more depression in the patient. And it was like the never-ending story. So we really tried to take a lot of novel approaches so that we dealt with all of the needs of the patient and not just a narcotic like methadone.
So I